And we're going to cover ACT reading passage, natural science passage, warp factor. Remember, the reading test falls into two categories, reference and inference. And natural science is over here on the reference side. It's much more technical. Some students find these easier. Some students find them harder. But you're over here on the reference side. There are more questions that are according to the passage type questions. Well, the natural science, the good thing is there's three strategies that work. Read and answer, of course. If you're fast enough to do a passage in 8.5 minutes and get the questions, by all means, read and answer. Google Summary is for those of you who are trying to read a little bit faster and you're going to miss a few things, or if you have trouble remembering what you just read, Google Summary is a good idea. And map and answer is a strategy that works pretty well for the science passages. We're going to talk about how to map and answer this passage. Our first step is going to be read and underline the first sentence of each paragraph and any targeted sentences. And I'll explain what that is. So the first sentence, astronomers sometimes describe the shape of our home galaxy, the Milky Way, as a thin crust pizza with a plum stuck in the middle. I'm going to keep going on this one because I want to see a little more what it says about this plum stuck in the middle. The plum is slightly oblong central bulge protruding about 3,000 light years above and below the galactic plane, comprised mostly of older stars, makes up the core of the Milky Way and includes a black hole 2.5 million times the mass of the sun. So that explains a little bit. So that's a little bit of a target sentence. The next one, the plum and pizza picture works well enough, but like most metaphors, it breaks down if you push it. So that lets us know that idea is not perfect. Why does the Milky Way have such an odd-looking warp? So the target sentence is a question. When it go on, it just says no definitive answer has emerged. So I know this was like, well, there's not conclusive evidence. The Sagittarius dwarf spheroid galaxy was discovered in 1994. Gravitational collisions between small satellite galaxies and big spiral galaxies have long been regarded as possible culprits in the warping of a large galaxy's disk. Did a pretty bad job of drawing straight lines there. The next one, Baelen's study, is the first to find such a link. I'm going to go the sentence after and the one before it to see if I can find out what such a link is. So read the sentence before it and the sentence after it. Then the last one started with the latest measurement of the structure and spin of the Milky Way. Baelen deduced the angular momentum of the warped portion of the Milky Way's disk. So step 2 is to map the questions. You're going to skim the questions and mark where they appear in the text. So 31, which of the following statements best expresses the main idea? We're going to always answer main idea questions last. So I'm going to put 31 down here at the end. 32, it can be reasonably inferred that the problem to the author mentions in line 33. So beside line 33, I'm going to put 32. The next one has lines 35 to 36, so I can put 33 there. Question 34, based on the passage, which of the following best describes Baelen's study? So I know we did Baelen's study up here, so I can put a 34 beside Baelen's study. Baelen discovered the angular momentum of the warped portion of the Milky Way. So angular momentum, we saw 2 spots here and up here, but warped portion of the Milky Way is in this last sentence. So I'm going to put 35 right there. 36, the central bulge of the Milky Way, that was up there at the beginning. The author refers to the swirling pattern of a hurricane. So I don't remember reading that when we mapped it, so we're going to skim the passage and see if you can find the words hurricane anywhere. And I do find it right over here, hurricane. If you can't find it, you would put 37 down there at the end. Don't spend too much time. Directly compared to the Milky Way's disk as it is affected by its warp. Again, it's going to be one of these two places, the warp. So I'm going to put it up here. No, I was wrong. That's not where I put it. I put it over here because it has some odd-looking warp. That makes sense. 39, according to the passage, which describes the movement of the Sagittarius dwarf. So Sagittarius dwarf is described right here. And the passage describes angular momentum. And angular momentum was over here. That's what I was thinking earlier. Okay, so the reason we did this is just to reorganize them in the way that ACT takes them out of order, that kind of puts them back in order of the passage. If you can do this quickly, I think it has benefit. If you had unlimited time, it has benefit. For some students, you might want to map the passage but not map the questions. It's up to you as what works best. Step 3 would be to answer the questions in the order they appear in the passage. So we start with number 36 and work our way down to number 31. Let's remember also that another strategy is Google Summary and Answer, where you write 1 to 3 words to describe what you just read in the paragraph. So my Google Summaries, first paragraph, galaxy shape. Second paragraph, wobbly. No answer to the warps. I put warp answer question mark. I put SD spaghetti beside this one. Sagittarius dwarf, and it describes it looking like spaghetti. I put collisions for that paragraph, whirl, and 1, just to briefly describe what each paragraph is. So we're going to go to the questions. According to the passage, the central bulge of the Milky Way is comprised of. So we map this question up first, right? And it says, the plum is a slightly oblong central bulge protruding about 3,000 light years above and below the galactic plane, comprised mostly of older stars. So older stars and a black hole. Has the black hole on there as well. 37, so we map this one over here. The author refers to the swirling pattern of a hurricane. And it says, the plum and pizza works well enough, but like most metaphors, it breaks down if you push it. The galactic disk isn't a rigid body, but a loose algorithm of matter streaming around the common center of gravity. The swirling pattern of a hurricane far better resembles our spinning galaxy. So referring to the hurricane kind of as in opposition to, or to better explain this plum and pizza one. So it's to help explain the shortcomings of the plum and pizza metaphor. It just takes it to a different direction. 38, the next one we mapped, primarily compares the Milky Way disk as it is affected by its warp 2. And this one's a little bit tricky. You got to read into this paragraph. Picture a pizza disc, a disc of pizza dough spun in the air by a skilled chef. Our galaxy goes through the same kind of wobbly gyrations. So it compares it to a pizza dough being spun in the air by a chef. So that's directly in the passage, but that one's a little bit tricky, as some of these are with natural science, tricky to find. It can be reasonably inferred the problem the author mentions in line 33. So line 33, an innovative analysis of the problem, and that problem is referred to in the topic sentence or topic question of this paragraph. Why does the Milky Way have such an odd-looking shape? So the question of which physical process caused the warp of the Milky Way. Why does it have such an odd shape? So H. 33 can be reasonably inferred from the passage that the small satellite galaxy referred to in lines 35 to 36, okay, these two are connected here, right, 35 to 36 here, small galaxy currently being ripped into shreds by the gravity of the Milky Way, the Sagittarius dwarf spheroid galaxy, so it refers to the Sagittarius dwarf. 39, according to the passage, which of the following statements best describes the movement of the Sagittarius dwarf with respect to the Milky Way? So we map that one here. And around line 40, we see it appears to be in roughly polar orbit around the Milky Way that is above the galactic disk, about 50,000 light years from the galactic center. So it appears to be in a roughly polar orbit around the Milky Way. So 34, based on the passage, which of the statements best describes Baelin's study as it relates to the field of astronomy? And I mapped that one up here, 34, because it's the first time I remember Baelin's study being mentioned in what I mapped. But I don't find the answer there. I don't find the answer until I go down here, quite a bit above it. And it says gravitational collisions between small satellite galaxies and big spiral galaxies have long been regarded as possible culprits as the warping of the larger galaxy's disk. So J, provide evidence the scientists had long considered a possibility not yet proved. So it's a theory, not something that's proved. So choice J, and that's a tricky one to find. And if you map the passage, you might have missed that one. So now we're at question number 40. The passage describes angular momentum as the amount of a system's what? So angular momentum. It's up here around line 64. His analysis of the galactic warp is based on angular momentum, a measure of how much a system is spinning or rotating. So J, pretty straightforward. 35, according to the passage, Bailey discovered the angular momentum of the warped portion of the Milky Way and the angular momentum of the Sagittarius dwarf are, okay, within the margins of measurement area, the angular momentum are identical in both quantity and direction. So identical in quantity and direction. And 31, which expresses the main idea of the passage. And the main idea is that evidence suggests the warp in the Milky Way results from the Milky Way's interaction with a small satellite galaxy. Of course, you can process of eliminate all of these to get to that answer. Here's all my questions answered in my passage annotated, which is more than I would do on an actual test. But most of these refer directly to the passage. All answers can be supported by text. The problem with natural science is they're not easy to find always. With mapping, though, if you got to this passage and you only had a few minutes left, you can map it and save some time. I doubt you'll get all 10 questions that way. You might get 7 or 8 questions that way. If you're lucky, you might get 9. But it's a strategy to have in your tool belt as you approach the ACT. What you have to do is practice to see which strategy works best for you based on how much time you have. Let me know if you have questions.